Hello there, welcome to Showcase. British artist Stael has designed and built a unique art installation at the United Nations headquarters. It is based on 17 goals laid out by the UN to transform the world. Take a look.
The Sustainable Development Goals is a game plan world leaders agreed on back in 2015. It was devised as 17 targets for peace and prosperity for both people and the planet by 2030. This year is the halfway mark for the project, and S. Devlin is part of an initiative to show what more can be done.
I've been working with this particular group with the Sustainable Development Goals with Project Everyone for some years. We've made a number of works, and I'm very interested in this series of colours, this series of forms. And really my role is, how do you take it from being a two-dimensional badge into being a three-dimensional experience installation that people can actually interact with.
Project Everyone says that today only 15% of the goals are on track to be met. The impact of COVID-19, conflicts and the climate crisis have reversed years of hard-earned progress. Devlin's installation represents all the goals and different takes on how to move forward.
So 17 doors, 17 artists and activists, cultural thinkers, writers from every continent, each providing their own lens on one of the goals, each offering a door, a point of entry for someone to start and dig into it, because they're complex, they're not simple. And we've made these gradients, so each of the colours, instead of being a solid colour like it is in the badge, is fading in or out. It's up to you to decide. Are we half there? Are we half full? Are we half empty? It's blurry. It's not clear. You know, things aren't clear. And I think this is kind of honest about that.
Although the numbers look worrying, Devlin is not a pessimist.
It's very joyful, hopeful, and already seeing people's curiosity is everything we hoped for. We want people to be curious. We want these doors to be portals to each of the 17 goals. And with seeing people open those doors, that's exactly what we hoped would happen.
The pavilion will also host a series of talks, demonstrations and films, as well as artistic performances focused on just and equitable solutions.
Nicolas de Stael was a prominent figure in the post-war French art scene for his abstract compositions and impasto painting style. And an exhibit in Paris now puts a light on his brief but prolific career.
Russian-born French artist Nicolas de Stael is famous for his thick brushstrokes and use of vivid color. His journey as an artist spanned between 1940 and 1955. Influenced by artists such as Cézanne and Van Gogh, de Stael produced around 2,000 works in his short career. The Museum of Modern Art in Paris presents de Stael's work, including 50 shown for the first time in a French museum. The exhibit is organized chronologically and traces the artist's developments from his first dark and matte canvases to the luminous paintings before his sudden death in 1955.
The career of Nicolas de Stael is extremely brief. It spreads over 12 years as he took his own life when he was 41 years old. So there is this very brief period, and at the same time he was a very inventive painter who worked constantly, who was incredibly intense in his work and created more than 2,000 works, about half of them graphic and the other half paintings. In this exhibition, we want to show this prolific aspect, but also that, from year to year, quickly and radically, he changes his style. He is an artist who evolves constantly, who is never satisfied with what he does.
After getting discovered by one of the Cubism inventors, Georges Braque, the artist achieved great success and his work was acquired by prestigious institutions. From his exile as a child after the Russian Revolution through his death at the age of 41, de Stael's life never ceased to influence his work. Rather than following the trends, the artist created his unique approach. His thick, textured paintings, palette knife techniques, and bold preference of unorthodox colors also influenced post-war art movements.
When he starts working on the abstract concept in 1942, abstract work still is a minority movement, still in its infancy. And de Stael goes for it, a bit against what was done at his time. In 1952, contrary to what he had done, he famously returned to representational art to introduce some elements of the real world in his paintings, such as objects, landscapes, and places, as with the famous Parc des Princes. He does that in 1952, at a time when abstract work actually became the dominant movement. So again, he goes completely against the style and trend of his time.
The retrospective is on display until January 21st, 2024, to invite visitors through de Stael's pictorial pursuit of rare intensity.
Avizeh Modigliani was the epitome of a tragic artist whose work captured the early 20th century France. And an exhibit in Paris now reflects on the artistic intricacies of the relationship between the painter and his dealer, Paul Guillaume.
Amedeo Modigliani was an Italian painter and sculptor who lived in a time when war was shaping societal structures and art movements were changing the creative environment. Inspired by the art districts of Paris, Modigliani is best known for his portraits with recurring motifs, such as long necks and almond-shaped eyes without pupils. Modigliani's meeting with art dealer Guillaume in 1914 marks a pivotal moment for the artist. Guillaume sold and collected his paintings while making them known in Parisian artistic circles. An exhibit in the Orangiere Museum covers both the characteristics of Modigliani's art and the ties between the painter and his dealer within the artistic context.
The role that Paul Guillaume plays, certainly during the war years, is fundamental. It does make a shift in Modigliani's career. Of course, following in 1917, he has his first solo show at the Bert Weil Gallery, which is obviously very important for his career, and which was not organized by Paul Guillaume. But it's because of what Paul Guillaume had done before that perhaps Modigliani was starting to become better known. And certainly after the war and after his death, particularly in 1920, the role that Paul Guillaume plays is really instrumental in creating a great market for Modigliani's work.
The artists believe that the eyes are the window to the soul, and their absence became his trademark feature. According to some art historians, the artist only added pupils to the eyes of people with whom he had a connection. Over 100 canvases, as well as 50 sketches and many sculptures by Modigliani passed through the hands of Guillaume. The numbers depict the extent of the dealer's assistance in the artist's promotion, but also his personal fondness for Modigliani's art. Amedeo Modigliani, a painter and his dealer, will be on display until January 15, 2024. The exhibit aims to revisit Modigliani's work under a new light and examines Paul Guillaume's role in publicizing the artist's work within the art market of the 1920s.
A Bosnian businessman has chosen an unusual way to celebrate one of Van Gogh's most famous paintings, the Starry Night. He's turned an expanse of meadows into a replica of the masterpiece. Here's the story.
When the stress of being in the insurance business became unbearable, Halim Zukic decided to seek peace and calm in nature. He bought some land near his hometown Visoko in Bosnia and Herzegovina and turned it into a nature park. Then, inspiration hit.
I was sitting here looking at the hill behind me, and a tractor drove through the meadow that was here at the time, leaving behind spiral-shaped traces. Something just clicked in my head, and I no longer had any doubts about what to do about horticulture and landscape architecture in the park.
The tracks reminded Zukic of Van Gogh's abstract painting of a starry sky above a village. Over the next 5 years, he had about a dozen ponds dug in the property. They're surrounded by swirly walking paths and 100,000 bushes of lavender in 6 different shades of blue and purple. The gardens also include roses and different aromatic plants to create a layout which, seen from above, resembles the Starry Night.
Through this project, I discovered the power of artists and art. Some 130 years after Van Gogh's painting, someone in Bosnia is creating something inspired by his art, inspired by the artist, and his life and his legacy.
Umjetnikov, odnosno mogli bi sad reći inspirisani njegovim životom, njegovim djelom.
And it worked wonders, not only on the land, but also on the owner.
Ovih 5 godina
The past 5 years spent on the development of this project have a special meaning for me in the sense that they have helped me mature as a human being. While interacting relatively late in life with this project, and Van Gogh, who is central to this story, I started looking at the world in a different way and discovered my artistic tendencies.
interakciju sa ovim projektom.
Zukic says he's learned what it means to have a focus in life and how it's defined him on his own path.
Norwegian artist Edvard Munch has been famous for his raw, emotional paintings. But his influence on Berlin's art scene is far less known, and a new exhibition at the German capital is exploring just that.
Although Edvard Munch was born in Norway, he spent a lot of time in Berlin. The city became his home away from home and the place where he launched his international career. Berlinische Galerie now traces this relationship between the artist and the city.
Die Berlinische Galerie hat ja eine ganz besondere Mission und die
The
lautet:
Berlinische Gallery has a special mission, and that is to collect and exhibit art that was created in Berlin. And it is always our incentive to show artists that you didn't really know had such a close relationship with Berlin. That is what we wanted to show with this exhibition. But we weren't sure that it was going to be possible. It was a huge effort.
gar nicht sicher, ob das klappen würde. Es war eine große Kraftanstrengung.
This effort Kohler is talking about was the task of loaning the 60 paintings on show in Berlin. Many are from the Munch Museum in Oslo, but there are also others from institutions across Europe.
I must say I'm a little bit jealous because it's such an obvious idea to bring Edvard Munch back to Berlin, but it's also very original to go back into, the archive, looking into who he met, what influenced him while he was here, and to make an exhibition about that, about an artist and the city.
Berlin is probably the most important city for Munch. It was where he got his breakthrough, but his art wasn't exactly what Germans at the time had expected to see. His first exhibition in Berlin was heavily criticized and ended a week earlier than planned.
Der Einfluss von Edvard Munch in
The influence of Edvard Munch on Berlin's art scene should not be underestimated. First, there was a moment of shock. Then he connected with the artists that were in the city, and he became a member of the group, the Berliner Session. As the name suggests, it was an artistic movement that wanted to break away from the mainstream. Through his art, he brought a lot of new aspects and impulses to the city.
Impulse in die Stadt hineingetragen.
Despite getting off to a bumpy start, Munch's relationship with Berlin only got stronger. Over the years, he kept returning to the city. He made friends with many artists and inspired the German Expressionist movement. Edvard Munch Magic of the North will run until January 2024.
It's been more than 4 months since the conflict in Sudan broke out. According to multiple United Nations agencies, the situation is spiraling out of control with millions in need of humanitarian aid. And a Sudanese artist paints wartime emotions to help the world see how damaging a war can be. This exhibit offers no vibrant colors or joyful portraits.
These art pieces rather reflect the trauma, depression, and sorrow of war. Sudanese artist Abdelrahman Abdallah wanted to document and show the world what's happening in Sudan. So he created these artworks in Ethiopia and called his exhibit Dark Tears.
So I come here for 1 month, I did these paintings because I have a lot of feelings that I have to express about the war, about what's happened to us. And always I have a lot of time. Not like when I'm home, you have to go back to souk, to market, to bring some things. So my full time is just for painting, for this project, and which I call it Dark Tears. So that's what I feel about the darkness that happened in Sudan.
Abdallah, who escaped the conflict in Khartoum, says his art represents how damaging the ongoing war is, not only for the people, but also for the culture and history of his country.
When you see it, it will help you to see what's going on in the human's mind, human pictures, human anatomy. Some paintings are distorted, a lot of distortions of the city, a lot of distortions of the human faces, human figures. And that's exactly what's happening in the world. So people can get a message from this. If it's a visual message or a psychological message, they have to feel there's something wrong happened to this human being.
Humanitarian organizations urge immediate international action for Sudan, where there's mass displacement and millions on the verge of famine. And now, Abdallah hopes his art pieces will help that call grow louder.
In an age when traditional crafts are slowly dying, one young man can still be found rummaging the forests of Lebanon. And he only has one goal in mind: to find the perfect piece of wood to shape into a cane.
These are a lot of memories that remain buried until something comes to revive them. This stick reminds me of my grandfather. He used to carry it. This is where he used to place his hand. The thing that I remember most is the sound the stick made. You used to hear this. Each stick has its own ring, sound, and identity. The stick has an identity that signifies a person. The priest has a stick. The shepherd had a stick. The king had a stick. The trader had a stick. The stick is more than a piece of wood. It resembles the status of the person and their position in society. These are names of the towns in Lebanon that I walked in. I wrote them on a stick, and of course my dear hometown Hayata is on the top of the stick.
An online fashion brand has been working hard to lift Afghan heritage to high fashion. Women from Afghanistan who mostly live in Pakistani refugee camps are also lending a hand. Here's more.
Marina Khan is a fashion designer who wants to change the perspective about Afghanistan. She designs intricate silver jewelry and pairs it with vibrant patterns to show off the beauty of Afghan culture. But her focus is not only aesthetics, she also promotes women's rights.
When I sort of started, I didn't know how underrepresented girls were, so I wanted to empower young women because I got so many messages, and through that my purpose and goals changed. You know, it was not only about selling jewelry or making a brand, it was more about changing the perspective about Afghanistan linked to war and giving another light, how beautiful the culture is, traditions are, and sort of like the artistic kind of way, but more in sort of like an editorial, high fashion way. That's what I wanted to show.
When Avizeh, meaning pendant in Farsi, was first founded, the company's sole focus was jewelry. Today, its scope has broadened to include clothes and, more importantly, to empower women for the region.
After a very long time, I can say today I'm here in this place where only this year I've started hiring women. And I was working on that for ages. I always wanted that. I went through different panels, through different pathways, but I always had some sort of barrier. Either, the society was very conservative and they wouldn't put women in the forefront. I wanted women to feel empowered and directly money to go to them, like direct sort of contact with them. And finally, this year, I can say after a long journey, I'm finally, I can interact with women. We are making things, there's a group of them, there's a group of 40 women that are part of my group now, and who I feel like sisterhood, and I feel so close to them, and there's something I wanted for such a long time.
The experience of working with these women who were forced to flee their country after the 2021 Taliban takeover has changed Khan profusely.
It's a very emotional journey, I'm not going to lie. A few years I stumbled through a camp, like an Afghan refugee camp in Pakistan. And that's how my journey sort of started, with connecting with people more. When you see things more firsthand, first sight, it's a totally different experience. It hits you, you're not the same. I feel so privileged, in the position I am. I want to do whatever I can to help them.
This emotional bond is what keeps Khan going, to provide more representation both to the culture and its women, especially in a time when it is so limited.
Archie is a landmark property that's defined U.S. pop culture since the 1940s. The hit TV series based on the comics has now called the curtains after 7 seasons, and it managed to stir controversy until the very end.
Oh, Grandma, look, we're nearly there.
Goodbye, town sign. Goodbye, Riverdale. It was wonderful getting to grow up here.
Riverdale, the series, followed high school chums Archie, Betty, Veronica, Jughead, and company through their various adventures. It was based on the comic book that has been around since 1941. The comics have the characters face daily life obstacles in humorous manner, and that quality allowed it to become a dominant force in the American subconscious for more than 80 years. But the television show succeeded in dividing opinion since the first day it aired. It doesn't really follow the blueprint laid out by the comics. In fact, it has taken so much liberties with Archie that it has caused some friction among fans. Well, the rebranding of characters did had first start with the comics, along with spin-off books that focused on supernatural storylines. But the TV series took that up a notch. For starters, it had a murder mystery flavor to it. Later on, horror, fantasy, and even sci-fi elements were added. And then, the producers decided to jump on the superhero bandwagon and gave some of the characters not-so-human talents. Then the other blockbusting theme, multiple universes, also found their way into the mix. There is the regular Riverdale timeline, the 1950s one, and in the last season, we got to see, spoiler alert, the future where Betty, now in her 80s, is the only surviving member of the gang. Some critics see these storylines as silly and even outrageous, but they kept the show on air for 7 seasons. It even helped other Archie publishing properties like Katy Keene and Sabrina to get their own series. So the company branched out to other areas of fandom media, the screen, and along the way took major liberties with the characters to stay in business. But how that sits with diehard Archie fans is of course another matter.
Have a good night.
Well, that's it for this episode of Showcase. I'm Esra Dürüst from me and the whole team here in Istanbul. Thanks so much for watching and bye for now.